The porch light burned yellow against the dark, rain sliding off the eaves in thin, cold threads. At exactly 9 p.m., my stepfather shoved me so hard I nearly missed the step. "This isn't your house anymore," he said, his hand already holding out a thin, white envelope. 2 crisp bills inside. $200 for 18 years of my life. I was still begging when she appeared, his new wife, leaning in the doorway, lips curled into a smirk. She didn't say a word, just watched him slam the door in my face. But the worst wasn't the shove. It was knowing the man who once promised to raise me like his own daughter had been walking out of a lawyer's office, weeks after my mother died. I thought the cold that night came from the rain. I was wrong. Funny how one cruel shove can tear open secrets you didn't know were buried. 3 months earlier, the mornings in our town always smelled like salt and paper. The tide rolled in lazy and low, carrying the cry of gulls. And somewhere in that hum, the faint scent of old books drifted from the library windows. That was my mom's world, narrow aisles of worn shelves, a little brass bell above the door that chimed whenever I came by after school. I can still picture her there, hair pulled back, a pencil tucked behind her ear, smiling without looking up as she stamped the inside cover of a novel. The other half of our days belonged to the boatyard. My stepfather's domain was all oil-stained concrete and the metallic ring of tools striking hulls. Boats bobbed in their slips like restless animals, and the smell, salt mixed with diesel, lingered on him even at dinner. It was the scent I came to associate with safety, at least back then. Dad had been gone since I was 7, a car accident, black ice on a winter road. I don't remember the crash itself, just the way the house felt afterward, silent, airless, as if it had been sealed shut. Mom worked double shifts at the library and cleaned rentals on weekends. She kept the bills paid, kept me in school clothes, kept herself upright. But the lines around her mouth deepened each year. Then came him. He wasn't flashy, just steady. Wore the same brown work boots every day. Never seemed to get sick, never raised his voice in public. He started fixing things around our place. First the leaky faucet, then the fence gate, then the screen door that had been hanging crooked for years. One night, over plates of spaghetti at the kitchen table, he looked straight at me. "I'll take care of you like you're my own daughter," he said. His voice was plain, not a grand gesture, but in a way that made it feel more real. Mom's eyes softened at that, and for the first time in a long time, the house didn't feel quite so empty. Life settled into a rhythm. Summer days were for the docks, watching him work, handing him wrenches I could barely lift. Afternoons, I'd sit in the back of the library while Mom sorted returns. We'd walk home together, the path lit gold by the setting sun. I didn't think much about the balance we'd found. It was just how things were. Then, at 18, everything split open. It was a Tuesday, late August. The sky was a blue so sharp it felt brittle. Mom didn't come home from work. They told me later it was an aneurysm, quick and merciless. I didn't see her in the hospital, only the stillness of her room afterward, her coffee mug half full on the counter, her reading glasses folded beside a stack of books. The days after were a blur of casseroles from neighbors, legal papers I barely read, and phone calls I let go to voicemail. He was the one who answered the door, who talked to people, who kept the lights on. He told me not to worry about the house or the bills, that Mom had left things in order. We buried her on a cliff above the water, where the grass bent in the wind and the air tasted like rain. I remember standing there, my hands cold even in the sun, listening to the waves slam the rocks below. He stood beside me, broad-shouldered, a solid wall against the wind. He was all I had left, I thought, clutching the folded program they'd handed me at the service. Or so I thought. The weeks that followed, I leaned on his presence without question. When I woke in the middle of the night, I'd hear the clink of a mug in the kitchen or the muffled hum of the TV. Those small sounds told me I wasn't alone. I didn't notice how often his phone lit up with messages he turned away from me, or how quickly he shut drawers when I walked into a room. If there were signs, I missed them. Or maybe I didn't want to see them. Grief has a way of narrowing your vision to the one thing that feels stable. For me, that was him, the man who'd stepped into my father's empty chair, who'd said the words I'd been aching to hear. But looking back, there was something else in that promise, a shadow under the steady tone. I couldn't name it then. All I knew was that when I looked at him across the dinner table, with the boatyard grime still under his nails, I felt a fragile kind of safety. It's strange how memory works. You think you're holding on to the warmth of a moment, but years later, you can feel the cold edges hiding underneath. I can still hear that sentence, "I'll take care of you like you're my own daughter," and taste the metallic tang in the air from the boatyard that night. I believed him. I had to, because the alternative, that I was truly alone, was a truth I wasn't ready to face. I didn't know then how quickly a promise could turn, or how the same voice that offered comfort could one day tell you to get out. But the tide in our town is relentless. It always comes in, and it always pulls something away, and it was already turning. The wind off the water was damp enough to cling. It carried the taste of salt and something metallic like rust. My hair stuck to my cheek as I rounded the last corner toward the house. The porch light was on. That was unusual for a weeknight. He usually sat in the living room with the TV throwing blue light across the curtains. I dug in my bag for the keys, fingers brushing past loose change and an old library card. The brass was cold against my skin when I fitted into the lock. It wouldn't turn. I jiggled it once, twice, harder. The lock resisted like it belonged to someone else. For a moment, I thought maybe he'd installed a new one and forgotten to tell me. But through the window, I could see them. A man I'd never seen before, laughing with his mouth full. A woman with her hair pulled into a sleek knot, passing a basket of bread. 2 kids, elbows on my mother's table, plates already smeared with sauce. The smells hit me next. Garlic, something roasting in the oven. Warm light pooled across the kitchen walls, glinting off the framed photo of Mom and me that used to sit at the end of the counter. Only it wasn't there anymore. I knocked, the sound too loud in the quiet street. No answer. I knocked again, and the door creaked open just enough for him to step into the frame. His face was blank, like he'd just opened the door to a delivery he hadn't ordered. He didn't lean against the jamb or ask where I'd been. He just held out a thin white envelope. "You need to stand on your own." The words didn't fit the scene. My hand didn't move to take it. The laughter from the kitchen drifted out through the gap, muffled but steady. "What?" My voice cracked. I hated how small it sounded. He didn't answer, just pushed the envelope into my palm. It was light, almost empty. I tore it open without thinking. 2 crisp $100 bills slid against my fingers. No note, no instructions. Just money, like I was some contractor he'd decided not to hire again. The porch boards felt soft under my shoes, damp from the evening air. I tried to search his face for a sign, guilt, hesitation, anything, but it was a closed door. Behind him, the clink of forks against plates. Why? The word came out sharper this time, a sliver of the disbelief curling in my chest. "You'll be fine," he said. Not even looking at me when he said it, eyes sliding toward the kitchen as if I were already gone. A car passed on the street, headlights sweeping over us. The light made the lines on his face look deeper. I realized then how far away he was standing, even in the small space between us. The envelope felt heavier than it should have. My fingers curled around it out of reflex, like holding on would anchor me. It didn't. Inside the house, one of the kids laughed so hard a fork clattered to the floor. I knew that sound, our floor, our table, our silverware, but it didn't belong to me anymore. I stepped back, my heel hitting the edge of the porch step. The air out here was colder, sharper, cutting through my jacket. I could still see them through the window when he closed the door, sealing the warmth inside. For a second, I just stood there on the sidewalk, the envelope in my hand, street lamp buzzing overhead. My breath came out in uneven clouds. I looked up at the second-story window, my old room. The curtains were open. A lamp burned inside. Someone else's shadow moved across the wall. It felt like I'd been erased from my own life. I didn't know where to go. My legs moved anyway, carrying me past the yard, past the hedges Mom used to trim every spring. The salt air filled my lungs until it stung. I kept walking, each step pulling me further from the light spilling out of the kitchen window, from the sound of plates and voices that had replaced mine. I didn't look back. The streetlights bled gold into the puddles, the glow breaking into ripples with each step I took. Rain had seeped through my jacket hours ago, finding its way down my back in thin, cold threads. My shoes squelched against the sidewalk, the rubber soles gripping and sliding in turn. The smell of the ocean clung to everything, the salt, the faint rot of kelp, and underneath it, the sharp tang of diesel drifting from the harbor. I didn't have a plan. My legs just carried me past shuttered storefronts and flickering neon signs, past the diner where Mom and I used to split pie on Friday nights. The red open sign blinked half-lit now, reflecting in the wet pavement like a broken heartbeat. I thought about going in just to get warm, but the idea of sitting under those buzzing lights, explaining myself to someone who might ask, felt worse than the rain. By the time the docks came into view, the storm had worked its way into my bones. Fishing boats rocked against their moorings, masts swaying like tired sentries. The smell of fish hung heavy, mixing with the mildew of the old boarding houses that lined the water. That's where I stopped. 3 stories of peeling paint and rusted gutters, a neon vacancy sign humming in the front window. Inside, the hallway was narrow and dim. The carpet held the ghost of 1,000 wet boots. The woman behind the counter barely looked up from her crossword when I asked about a room. She slid a brass key toward me, the number 6 stamped into it, her pen never pausing. Room 6 was at the end of the hall. The door stuck before it gave way, and the smell hit me first, damp wood, old salt, and something faintly sour, like wet laundry forgotten too long. The wallpaper, once patterned with tiny blue flowers, was curling at the seams. A single window looked out onto the dark silhouette of cranes at the shipyard. I set my bag down on the bed, the springs groaning in protest, and pulled off my jacket. It was no drier inside than out. I sat there for a while, listening to the rain tap against the glass, the sound muffled, but insistent. The envelope with the 2 bills was still in my pocket, heavier now in a way that had nothing to do with weight. I took it out, set it on the nightstand, and stared at it until the numbers blurred. A knock broke the quiet. Not sharp, just a slow, deliberate tap-tap. When I opened the door, an older man stood in the hall, leaning on a cane polished from years of use. His gray hair was slicked back, his raincoat dripping onto the carpet. "Didn't mean to bother you," he said, voice rough like he'd been talking over the wind all his life. "Just thought I'd say hello. Not many new faces around here." I nodded, unsure if small talk was something I could manage right now. He glanced at the key still in my hand. "Number 6, huh? Had a fisherman in there last month. Left in a hurry. Didn't pay his rent either." His eyes narrowed slightly, curious without being unkind. I managed a thin smile. "Guess I'll try to break the pattern." As he shifted his cane, something seemed to occur to him. "Hey, I saw your stepdad last week, near the courthouse." The words hung there, mixing with the smell of wet wool and sea air. "Near the courthouse?" I repeated. Like if I said it wrong, it wouldn't mean what it did. "Yeah, walking out of that law office on Main. You know the one across from the clock tower?" He shrugged. "Looked like he was in a hurry?" I felt my fingers curl against the doorframe. The courthouse, law office, paperwork. Mom's handwriting flashed in my mind. Lists on the fridge, little notes tucked in my lunch. The thought of him carrying anything with her name on it made my stomach knot. The man gave a polite nod and started back down the hall, cane tapping in rhythm with his steps. "Welcome to the neighborhood," he called over his shoulder. When the door clicked shut, the room seemed smaller. The damp in the air pressed closer. I sat on the edge of the bed again, staring at the warped floorboards, the sound of the rain now a steady drumbeat against the roof. What was he doing at a law office? What papers could he have that belonged to him and not to me? The rain on my skin was nothing compared to the chill in my chest. The smell of burnt espresso and steamed milk clung to my hair, even after hours of working the morning rush. Cups clinked. The espresso machine hissed like it was angry, and a chorus of impatient sighs rose from the line that wrapped almost to the door. My hands moved on autopilot, wipe the counter, clear the plates, smile at the customers who never looked up from their phones. I was leaning across to swipe up a ring of spilled latte when I heard it. "No way! Is that you?" I turned, rag still in hand, and there she was, Lily Myers. Same quick smile, same dark eyes that always made her look like she knew a joke you didn't. The last time I saw her, we were 17 and skipping math to sit on the bleachers. She'd been the kind of friend who shared gum and secrets in equal measure. "Lily?" My voice came out like I wasn't sure it was real. She laughed, pulling her scarf tighter. "I thought that was you. God, it's been years. You work here now?" I nodded, tucking a loose strand of hair behind my ear, suddenly aware of the coffee stains on my apron. "Just part-time." Her smile softened. "I heard about your mom. I'm so sorry." I swallowed, the back of my throat tightening. "Thanks." She glanced toward the corner booth, already half turning away. "Hey, I've got my laptop with me. Mind if I hang out for a bit? I'm on break from the firm." I frowned. "Firm?" "I'm a legal assistant now, just down on Main." She grinned like it was nothing. "Still in training wheels, but I'm learning fast." That word, legal, lodged in my head, sharp and bright. Before I could overthink it, the words came out. "You ever look up public records for people?" Her brows lifted. "Sometimes. Why?" I hesitated, glancing toward the clock over the counter. The second hand ticked loud in my ears. "My stepdad, he kicked me out, just like that. No warning. I think it's about the house. My mom's house." Her smile faded. "What do you mean, kicked you out?" I told her. About coming home to strangers in the kitchen, about the envelope with 2 bills, about the way he didn't even look at me when he said it. She didn't interrupt, just let the words fill the space between us, her hands still on her scarf. When I was done, she set her bag on the counter and pulled out a sleek silver laptop. "Okay," she said quietly. "Let's see what we can find." We claimed the corner booth. She tapped away, the glow from the screen turning her face into shifting shades of blue and white. I tried not to stare, but my eyes kept tracking the way her expression moved, focused, casual, then something else, a flicker. Her fingers froze on the keys. She leaned closer to the screen, lips parting just slightly, like she'd read a word that didn't fit. Then her jaw tightened. "What is it?" I asked. She didn't answer right away, just closed the laptop halfway, like whatever was inside might leak out if she left it open too long. "I need a few more days," she said finally, her voice careful. My skin prickled. "A few days for what?" Her smile was small, almost apologetic. "Just let me check something before I tell you. I want to be sure." Her eyes said she'd found something, but her mouth wouldn't. A barista called my name for an order that wasn't mine. The moment broke like a dropped glass. Sharp edges, no way to piece it back together. Lily slid out of the booth, wrapping her scarf around her neck. "I'll call you," she said, touching my arm briefly before heading for the door. I watched her leave, the cold air rushing in as she opened it, the bell over the frame jingling. Outside, the light caught in her hair for a second before she disappeared into the crowd on Main Street. The cafe noise swelled back around me, the hiss of milk, the clatter of cups, but my mind was already racing ahead. What could be in those records that made her shut the laptop like that? 2 days later, the air in the park felt thin, almost breakable, the kind of cold where you could hear leaves scrape over the path like dry paper. I spotted Lily sitting on a weathered bench, a manila folder balanced on her lap. She waved me over, her other hand wrapped around a paper cup. "Coffee. Figured you might need it," she said, sliding it toward me. The steam curled up and disappeared into the pale light, and I knew before she spoke that whatever she had wasn't going to be good. I sat, the wood under me chilled through my jeans. "So, what'd you find?" She glanced around, just joggers in the distance, a couple walking a dog. Still, she leaned in like the trees might be listening. "This," she said, opening the folder. The first page was crisp, with my mom's name in neat black type. Lily tapped the paragraph halfway down. "Original will. Everything. House, insurance payout, goes to you. No disputes." For a second, my breath came easier. The paper felt solid in my hands, proof that Mom had thought of me, not him. "Now," she said, flipping to the second document, "this is where it gets weird." The date hit me first. 2 weeks after she died. My eyes skimmed the rest, same header, same layout, except the last section. The house and insurance now went entirely to my stepdad. The signature at the bottom? The loops in her name were gone. Her handwriting always dipped just before the Y, like a bird folding its wing. This one was stiff, jagged, the letters leaning the wrong way. "This was signed after your mom died," Lily said quietly. I kept staring at the page. The park noises faded. The leaves, the dog's collar jingling, even the distant hum of cars. All I could hear was the scratch of a pen that wasn't hers. "You're sure?" My voice felt far away, like I was speaking underwater. "Positive. And—" She hesitated, her thumb brushing the edge of the paper. "The notary listed here? Retired 3 years ago, before any of this." I ran my finger over the fake signature. The ink looked fresh, the kind that smears if you're careless. I imagined someone leaning over my mom's papers, forging the only thing left of her voice, then sliding it into a folder like it was just business. The coffee in my hand had gone cold, but I didn't let go. I needed something to hold. "You think he did this?" I said. Not a question. "I think someone did this for him," she replied, "and whoever it was knew exactly what they were doing." The wind picked up, sending a scatter of leaves across our shoes. I tried to remember the last time my stepdad had looked me in the eye. Not since the porch. Not since he handed me that envelope and shut the door. It wasn't just about kicking me out, it was about erasing me. I closed the folder slowly, my thumb pressing over that fake signature one more time. In my head, Mom's real handwriting bloomed against grocery lists, birthday cards, notes left on the fridge. All of it warm, alive, nothing like this cold ink. If they could fake her hand, they could fake anything. The boatyard smelled the same as it had my whole childhood. Oil baked into wood, salt riding the air from the harbor, the metallic clang of tools echoing off corrugated walls. Only now it didn't feel like a place I belonged. The grit under my shoes crunched too loud, each step drawing stares from men in overalls who slowed their work just enough to watch me pass. I found him near the open bay where a half-gutted fishing boat hung in the slings. He was hunched over an engine block, forearms slick with grease. When he saw me, he didn't smile, didn't even ask why I was there, just wiped his hands slowly on a rag, like he had all the time in the world. "So," he said, his voice almost casual, "come to check if I'm stealing your toys?" The rag made a soft, steady squeak against his skin. I could feel my pulse in my throat. "I saw the will," I said. "And the other one, the one dated after Mom died." His laugh was short, sharp. "You've been busy." I stepped closer, enough to smell the mix of diesel and whatever soap he used to scrub his hands clean. "It's fake. You know it. I know it. I'm not just walking away." Something in his eyes shifted. Not surprise, not guilt, but a kind of amused pity. He took one slow step forward until there was only a few inches between us. The rag hung from his hand like a limp flag. "Don't dig," he said, his voice dropping low enough that it was almost a whisper. "You won't like what you find." For a second, I forgot the cold. The boatyard noise faded, the hammering, the grinding, all replaced by the faint tick of cooling metal beside us. I wanted to say something back, something sharp enough to cut through his calm. But my mouth stayed closed. I just stared at him, wondering how long he'd been planning this moment. He smiled, not kindly. "Go home," he said, turning back to the engine. "You've got nothing here." I walked away, the crunch of gravel under my boots suddenly louder, faster. Behind me, the clang of tools started up again, like our conversation had never happened. That night, I didn't sleep much. His words kept replaying. "Don't dig. You won't like what you find," mixing with the smell of diesel that still clung to my hair. I told myself it was just a threat, just talk meant to scare me off. The next morning, I learned it wasn't just talk. I went to buy coffee at the corner shop, handed over my card. The cashier slid it back with an awkward half-smile. "Declined," she said. I laughed, thinking it was a glitch. Tried again, same result. Back in my rented room, I logged into my account. Balance, $0. Below it, a string of words I'd never seen before. Access restricted pending review. He'd found a way to reach into my life without even being in the same room. And he'd done it overnight. His warning wasn't just in my head anymore. It was sitting in black and white on my laptop screen. I waited until the street was quiet. Just the low hum of a street lamp and the occasional slap of waves against the harbor wall. The house looked smaller than I remembered, crouched in the dark like it was holding its breath. My house. My mother's house. The front porch light was off, but a pale band of moonlight cut across the side yard, glinting off the window glass. I slipped through the gate I used to swing open every day after school, now sticky from months of salt air. The hinges squeaked, a thin, ugly sound in the stillness, and I froze. No movement inside. The back door had always had a lock you could jiggle loose if you knew the trick. I crouched, pressing my palm against the damp wood, fingers finding the familiar groove. The metal clicked after a few slow tries. My breath caught in my throat as the door gave way, just enough to slip through. The smell hit first, cleaner and something unfamiliar, like store-bought candles. Mom used to make the place smell like coffee and old paper from the library. Now it was staged, scrubbed, someone else's air. I kept to the shadows, shoes whispering against the wood floor. Through the slats of the blinds, strips of moonlight painted the living room in sharp white bars. The couch was gone, new curtains. A vase of perfect plastic flowers sat on the coffee table. The hallway to her bedroom felt longer than it should. Every creak of the floorboards was louder in my head, each one an invitation for someone to flick on a light and ask what the hell I was doing there. Inside the room, I hesitated. The blinds were half open, the moon carving silver shapes across the carpet. The closet door was shut, but I could see the faint outline of dust where something used to lean against it. My chest tightened. I slid the door open an inch at a time. The smell of cedar spilled out. And there it was, the small wooden box my mom kept on the top shelf, the one she never let anyone else touch. My fingers brushed the carved lid. Cold. I eased it down, cradling it like it might shatter. The latch was simple, worn from years of her thumb pressing it open. Inside, letters. Stacks of them. Some folded neatly, some bent at the edges like they'd been carried around for days before being put away. I sat cross-legged on the carpet, my knees casting shadows in the moonlight, and unfolded the first one. The paper was yellowed just slightly, her handwriting slanted and sharp. Only now, the lines wavered. "I don't trust him," one read. "I think he's planning something. If anything happens to me, don't believe the story they tell you." My pulse stumbled. Another. "There's talk about the insurance. I can't prove it yet. Someone is pushing me, hard, to sign things I don't understand." She never wrote a name, never said who someone was. Just hints, fragments, warnings that felt like they'd been sealed away for me to find. One letter's ink had bled at the edge, as if a drop of water, maybe a tear, had smeared it before it dried. "If they get their way, you'll have nothing left. Not the house, not a penny. Please, be careful who you trust, even family." I held that one longer, the paper trembling in my hands. Her handwriting trembled, and so did I. The air in the room felt tighter, heavier, like she was here, watching me read her private fears, and like someone else might be standing just outside the door. I put everything back exactly how I'd found it, sliding the box into the same dust shadow on the shelf, closing the closet, letting the moonlight fall exactly where it had before. By the time I slipped out the back, the tide had shifted. The air smelled sharper, colder. The letters didn't give me a name, but they gave me something else, the certainty that my mother had seen this coming, and that meant whoever had done it had been close all along. The next morning, the fog still clung to the harbor like it didn't want to let go. I followed the directions Lily had scribbled on a napkin, weaving through streets that smelled of brine and burnt coffee until I found the place, an old brick building wedged between a pawn shop and a shuttered tailor. The paint on the doorframe was peeling in long, curled strips, like no one had bothered to touch it in decades. Inside, the air was thick with dust and old paper. The blinds were drawn halfway, slashing the light into pale rectangles across a desk buried under stacks of manila folders. A fan in the corner hummed without moving much air. "Miss Harper?" The voice came from behind one of the stacks. A man stood, thin and stooped, his tie loosened like he'd given up on formality years ago. His hair was mostly white, combed back in a way that didn't quite hide the stray wisps. I nodded, and he gestured to a chair that creaked under my weight. "I don't take many meetings these days," he said, lowering himself into his seat with a slow sigh. But Lily said you were persistent. I didn't answer right away. My eyes kept drifting to the thin layer of dust on the windowsill, the way the sunlight caught in it, like tiny floating motes were listening in. I knew your mother, he began, his voice steady but softened by age. Not well, but enough to recognize trouble when it came for her. I leaned forward. You were her lawyer? Not exactly. More of an advisor. I met her through the library board. She came to me when she was in the hospital. This was 2 weeks before she passed. He picked up a pen and rolled it between his fingers, eyes narrowing like the memory hurt to look at. She was upset. Said someone was pushing her to sign documents she didn't understand. The air in my chest seemed to shrink. Was it? He cut me off gently. She didn't name him outright, but the woman who brought the papers, she worked for the insurance company handling your mother's policy. I gripped the arms of the chair, the leather cold under my palms. What happened? I told your mother to wait, to have the documents reviewed. She agreed at first, but the next day I couldn't reach her. Hospital said she'd already signed. He set the pen down, the click echoing in the small room. When I pressed for details, the paper trail vanished. Someone made sure there was no record of my involvement. The silence stretched until the fan's low whine filled it. I could feel the tension pulling the back of my neck tight. Do you remember her name? I asked. He nodded slowly. Mary Chandler, mid-40s, wore her hair in a tight bun, glasses she kept pushing up her nose. His gaze drifted toward the window, then back to me. I saw her a few months ago by chance, at the grocery store on Harbor Lane. The name felt foreign and dangerous on my tongue. And she wasn't alone. His mouth twisted like he'd swallowed something sour. She was with your stepfather, pushing a cart. They looked comfortable. Too comfortable. I waited for him to keep talking, but he didn't. My voice came out sharper than I intended. What are you saying? He met my eyes without flinching. She's living there now. It landed like a lead weight in my gut. The house, my mother's house, wasn't just his anymore. It was theirs. The woman who'd pushed my mother in her weakest moment was now unpacking groceries in the kitchen where Mom used to hum over a pot of soup. I stared at the scuffed floorboards, imagining footsteps that didn't belong there. It wasn't just him. It was her, too. Outside, the fog had lifted, but the light felt colder when I stepped back onto the street. The seagulls overhead sounded harsher, their calls sharper, like they were warning me to stop. But I knew I wouldn't. The rain had stopped by morning, but the street still held its memory. Dark patches of damp on the pavement, a faint smell of wet asphalt. I climbed the narrow stairs to Lily's office, clutching the folder we'd been building like it was a life raft. Inside, the air smelled of burnt coffee and printer toner. The blinds were half open, letting in a slice of pale winter light that made the dust motes swirl above her desk. All right, Lily said, pushing a stack of forms toward me. We've got copies of the will, the supplement, the notarization logs, or rather the missing ones, and your mom's letters. It's not airtight, but it's enough to file. We spent hours cross-checking dates, highlighting discrepancies, filling out the petition to take to court. The sound of her keyboard was relentless, keys clicking like tiny hammers building something out of thin air. Every so often she'd mutter under her breath, "This doesn't line up," or "They got sloppy here." My phone started ringing just after noon. His name lit up the screen in block letters. I let it buzz out. It rang again and again. By the fourth time, Lily raised an eyebrow. "You gonna answer that?" I shook my head. "Not here." When I finally stepped out for air, the chill hit me like a slap. The call came again, and this time I let it connect. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" His voice was all edges, sharp and loud. "You think you can smear my name? You think—" I hit the speaker button so I wouldn't have to feel his voice against my ear. "You forged my mother's signature." I kept my tone flat, almost bored. "And you had help." Silence for a beat, then a scoff. "You've been talking to the wrong people. Listen, kid." I ended the call. Back upstairs, we worked until the light outside turned amber, then gray. The folder was thicker now, the petition ready to file in the morning. My phone buzzed again. I didn't need to look to know it was him. This time, his voice was syrup. "Hey, I'm sorry for how things got messy. Why don't we meet? Just talk. I can explain everything." I stared at the wall as he spoke, the paint chipped where someone's chair had scraped it over the years. "I have nothing to say to you," I said finally, and hung up. In my tiny rented room that night, the folder sat on the table like a loaded weapon. The hum of the mini-fridge filled the silence. I thought about the times I'd let him set the terms, control the space, control me. Not anymore. If I met him now, it'd be on his terms. I'm done with that. The wind rattled the loose pane in my window all night, but it wasn't the cold that kept me awake. The petition was filed. My phone had gone quiet. That silence didn't feel like peace. It felt like someone holding their breath. I'd just set down my mug of instant coffee when I heard it. A quick scuff against the hallway floor, then the faint rasp of paper sliding against wood. I opened the door to an empty corridor, dimly lit by the flickering bulb near the stairs. The envelope lay at my feet, plain and unmarked, just wide enough to hold a folded letter, except it wasn't paper inside. Back in my room, I locked the door and sat on the edge of the bed. The envelope's flap had no glue, just tucked in, as if whoever sent it didn't want to leave a trace. Inside was a single USB drive. No note, no instructions. The lamplight threw a warm circle over the table as I plugged it into my battered laptop. For a moment the screen stayed black, my reflection faint in the glass. Then a single file popped up. audiosaro1.mp3. I pressed play. Static. A faint hum. Then his voice. My stepdad's. Low and deliberate, the way he spoke when he was trying to make something sound reasonable. "Keep her quiet," he said. A woman's voice followed. Sharp, quick, like she'd been rehearsing this line. "Split the money." Silence after that, except for the sound of chairs scraping and a door closing in the background. The recording couldn't have been more than 8 seconds, but my hand stayed frozen on the trackpad long after it ended. I played it again and again. On the third loop, I noticed it. An echo, the kind you get in a small room with tile floors, a space I knew but couldn't quite name. Whoever made this recording had been close enough to catch every breath, every scrape of wood against floor. They hadn't sent me a threat or a warning. They'd handed me a match. My mind spun. This wasn't the kind of thing you stumbled across by accident. Someone had planned this. Someone who knew where they'd meet, when they'd talk, and exactly what I needed to hear. I leaned back in the chair, the USB still warm between my fingers. My chest felt tight, not from fear alone, but from the sharp edge of a new thought. I wasn't just being watched by them. Someone else was watching all of us. The lamplight flickered once, like it was agreeing with me. Someone out there wants me to win, or to burn us all. The courthouse smelled faintly of old paper and polished wood, like history itself had seeped into the walls. I sat at the plaintiff's table, hands clasped so tightly my knuckles ached. Across the aisle, my stepdad leaned back in his chair, his attorney whispering into his ear. He didn't look at me. Not yet, but I could feel the weight of his presence, the same way you feel a storm pressing down before it breaks. Reporters clustered in the back row, their camera lenses like unblinking eyes. Every time someone shifted in a seat, the sound of wood creaking seemed to echo twice as loud. The judge entered, robes swaying, and the room rose in unison. My heartbeat synced with the gavel's sharp crack. Lily sat beside me, a neat stack of files in front of her. She slid the USB across the table toward the bailiff when the judge called for evidence. The screen at the side of the courtroom flickered to life. The audio played. "Keep her quiet," his voice said, cold and measured. "Split the money," the woman's voice answered. No one coughed. No one shuffled papers. It was the kind of silence that pulls at your ribs, stretching time out until it feels unbearable. The judge nodded once, then turned to the handwriting expert. The man adjusted his glasses and held up enlarged images of my mother's signature, one from her will, the other from the so-called supplement. "The loops in the authentic signature are consistent and fluid," he said, tapping the first image. "In the supplement, the strokes are hesitant, unnatural. Additionally, the supplement is dated after the decedent's death." The judge's gaze shifted to my stepdad. "Do you have any explanation for this?" His lawyer started to speak, but my stepdad cut him off. "This is a witch hunt," he said, voice rising. "She's trying to steal—" "Enough," the judge said, her voice slicing through the air like a blade. She leaned forward, hands folded. This court finds in favor of the plaintiff. The supplement is invalid. The original will stands. Furthermore, due to credible evidence of fraud, I am ordering an immediate investigation. The gavel fell again. Just like that, the weight that had been pressing on my chest for months shifted, didn't disappear, but moved. 2 deputies approached my stepdad. He stiffened as they cuffed him, the metal snapping shut around his wrists. For the first time, he looked at me. His eyes were flat, unblinking, and when he spoke, his voice was low enough that only I could hear. "You'll regret this." The deputies pulled him toward the door. The reporters surged forward, questions spilling into the hallway like water from a burst pipe. Lily touched my arm. "Let's get out of here." We stepped into the corridor, the courthouse's fluorescent lights humming above us. My reflection in the glass doors looked steadier than I felt. Outside, the autumn air was sharp, clean, almost sweet. I'd won. But the war wasn't over. The front door stuck for a second before giving way, the wood swollen from years of salt air. Inside, the house smelled like it always had, a mix of sea brine, old wood, and the faint trace of my mother's lavender polish clinging stubbornly to the furniture. Dust floated in the slanted light, catching on the frames lining the hallway. I walked to the living room, my shoes quiet on the warped floorboards. The photo of Mom sat on the mantel, the glass cloudy from neglect. I wiped it with the hem of my sleeve, careful not to smudge her smile. Her eyes seemed to follow me, like they always had when I was a kid, sneaking cookies before dinner. The window was open, letting in the tang of the ocean. A breeze pushed the sheer curtains inward, the fabric brushing my arm as if in passing. Far off, a ship's horn called, a deep, low sound that carried across the water. It was the kind of sound that made you pause, that reminded you there was always something moving just beyond the horizon. The court case was over. The will stood. The fraud was exposed, but my mind kept circling back to the plain, unmarked envelope that had slid under my door that night. The USB had been my sharpest weapon, and yet I still didn't know whose hand had passed it to me. Someone out there had been watching, close enough to record whispered deals, close enough to know where I lived. I pulled out a chair and sat by the window, the sea breeze cool on my face. The sky was streaked with orange and pink, the sun easing down toward the water. I tried to imagine the sender. Were they still out there, waiting for the next move? Were they an ally, or just someone with their own score to settle? The thought didn't scare me the way it might have weeks ago. Maybe it was because I'd stood in court and faced him. Maybe it was because I'd seen him in cuffs. Or maybe it was because I'd learned something I couldn't unlearn, that storms pass, but so do calms. I traced the edge of Mom's photo frame with my fingertip. If the next storm comes, I thought, I'll be ready. The curtain swayed again, and I let the sound of the waves and the distant horn fill the quiet. Somewhere out there, another story was beginning. Have you ever uncovered a betrayal that changed everything? Share your story in the comments, subscribe for more true life revenge stories, and don't forget to like and share this video.